record our meetings. We record our meetings in order to provide the videos to members who missed these sessions. They are not posted publicly, but if anyone misses, they can get in touch with me and I can send them the video. I would also like to let you all know that closed captioning is turned on. If you would like to access that, you can go to the bottom, typically the bottom of your screen, and turn on the live transcript. We also have an ASL interpreter here. If you go through the video list and find the box labeled interpreter, you should be able to pin that and see her commentary. If there are ever any other accommodations that you need, please be in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat, and likely if you're here, you've already received an email from me. So thank you all for being here. So again, welcome to the Community Mobility Committee. As a reminder, this is a place for residents and interested individuals to advocate for and learn about mobility and transportation issues in the city of St. Louis. So to that end, please be respectful in conversations and questions. We're really grateful to have so many staff from the city here today. And we encourage everyone participating to be respectful of their hard work and efforts and of the range of varying opinions that we have in this city. Please also avoid all jargon and acronyms. If you're using a technical transportation term, please define it and ideally share a link in the chat so that we can all learn a little bit more about this world that we're working in. Not everyone who's participating is a professional in transportation, and we want to make sure that we are creating an inclusive space where we're all growing. And then I'm also going to ask everyone to be mindful of time. We're going to be encouraging more follow-up to happen outside of the CMC meeting, and I'll talk some more specifically about that on some specific issues. But we will do our follow-up through notes and direct answers to questions. We hope this will help us keep our meetings focused and respectful. And I want to really encourage folks to use the chat as a place to share comments and questions. Everything that is in the chat gets captured and goes into the notes. Dawn is taking notes for us today. So our notes are really detailed, and that's a great resource to make sure that we are capturing all the things that are happening. Okay. So I want to do just some quick introductions. If you are a member or a visitor to the committee, could you please put your name, your organization if you have one, or your neighborhood into the chat so we can see who's here in the Zoom room today. And then I'm going to ask our city staff and partners who are here to do just a quick round of introductions so we know who's in the room with us. And I'm going to start with Scott.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Scott Ogilvie, City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency, Program Manager for Complete Streets. Let's hop over to David Newberger.
Hi, it's David Newberger. Excuse me. I am the leader of the Office on the Disabled for the city, and also Andrew Lackey, who is a regular, I think, participant in this committee, is with us today, and we'll both be here. And toss it to, well, Andrew, why don't you go ahead?
Who are you talking? So I'll go. I'm Andrew Lackey. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office on the Disabled. And I will pass it to Grace.
Hi, everyone. Grace Chung, Mayor's Office. I will pass it to John Kohler.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Kohler, City of St. Louis Board of Public Service, Planning and Programming Manager. And that might be it from the city.
I think we had Bethany in transit earlier, but she may be off right now. So maybe she'll be able to join us later. All right, thanks, folks. And thanks to those of you who are introducing yourselves in the chat. Thanks to our city partners for being here. So I am going to drop into the chat 2 documents. You likely also received these in email, but we have the agenda for today's meeting. And then I will also drop in the notes from our June meeting. I want to just raise if there are any concerns or questions about our notes from the June meeting before we put those into our record. Okay, if there are updates, please email me. So we are now going to move into our time of public concerns. So as a reminder for those of you who have been here before, this is a chance for members of the committee and of the general public to share some of the things that they've observed around transportation and mobility. So we invite any member of the committee or of the public to share those concerns in a brief, concise way for up to 2 minutes. We also share any concerns we receive via email. One of the things about this is we ask there not to be any verbal response or feedback to these comments. Please feel free to chime in the chat. We'll do follow-up after the meeting, but we want to try and stay focused and on task here. So we'll do that follow-up and make sure that the folks who ask the question and also the people for whom that is most relevant are hearing that feedback and comments. So I want to open up the floor and see if there's any comments. I think we have one in the chat. Patrick, I'm just going to read directly from you. Patrick asks from Twitter, can we get an update about the enforcement of the rules pertaining to construction sites? This does not seem to be enforced. Is the group going to publicly say anything about the 2 hit and runs on pedestrians? Have all the groups or individuals who have applied to the committee been contacted in response to applications? And who manages the city website? And so this is a bunch of different questions. So the first comment, which Jackie is giving a +1 to, is around the work zone mobility and whether or not there is enforcement. This has been something that's come up in the past. So we will make sure that that comment goes again back to the streets department and that we ensure that we get some follow-up on what's happening with construction and being able to walk around construction sites. The second comment Patrick is sharing is about the recent hit and runs on pedestrians. I guess I can say that we have not made a public statement on that yet. That is an extremely pressing issue. If folks are not aware, there are some recent hit and runs. And Kia is also adding to that we'd love to discuss the controversial call from Tower Grove East Neighborhood Group for more police presence in the area for greater enforcement. And Kia, if you're willing, can you drop the link to the Tower Grove East Neighborhood Association call into the chat so we have that for the record? On the hit and runs, we have Alderwoman Ingracia is just joining us. So if we have a few minutes at the end of this section, perhaps we can come back to that. Patrick's third comment, groups and individuals contacted the committee. Have they been responded to? The answer is yes, and we'll hear a little bit more from the engagement committee about that at the end of the meeting. And then who manages the city website for announcement of meetings or sharing of agendas or meeting minutes? We will follow up with you afterwards, Patrick, about this. Okay, so a lot of comments in the chat. I would like to take just a minute to open the floor on the construction work zone mobility, if anyone has any additional comments they want to share.
One follow-up question that Liz would be, I know that there was discussion about hiring inspectors. It would be nice to know where that process stands and if those people have been put in place to be reviewing these construction sites.
Thank you, Jackie. We will follow up on that. It's a great question. Okay, Alderwoman Ingracia, you are here, and I wanted to hold this until you were actually connected. So we have a couple of questions and a desire for some discussion about the recent hit and runs, including the one on South Grand, which is just outside your ward boundaries. So I want to open the floor to committee members if there are any comments about the recent hit and runs issues you would like to bring to the table.
There's been several comments and commentary centered around hit and runs for quite some time. I know that we're specifically focusing on the most recent 2. And I would be interested to hear kind of what are we even from the alderman, are they taking a closer look at enforcement centered around hit and runs or police presence? I'm just interested to hear more thought around it because hit and runs are continuing to increase, and I haven't seen anything centered around resolution regarding.
Yeah, may I ask just quickly, with whom am I speaking? I can't see you and I can't see your name.
I'm sorry. My name is Tiffany Stanfield. I am the founder of Fighting Hard, Fighting Against Hit and Run Driving. Great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm not going to give anybody answers that they're probably going to be particularly happy with today. The one thing that I know we have coming that's a glimmer of hope, but not enough money, is I think about $250,000 in the fiscal year 23 budget to traffic or to look at traffic in a more comprehensive manner citywide. I don't believe that's going to come close to the amount of money that we really need to do it, and also doesn't include funding for implementation. Right now, everything that we're doing is very piecemeal in the city of St. Louis. I, along with a number of other people, have instituted quite a number of traffic calming measures in our wards, but if your alderman is not interested in working on that, then that's a problem. So I think we really need to continue encouraging the mayor's office and the streets department to make this a priority. I heard somebody mention the work zone and, mobility ordinance. I've tried to follow up on that numerous times without any real seemingly interest on the part of the streets department or the mayor's office. So I think any advocacy that we can agree to and within this group, I would appreciate your feedback, because despite, I think, individual political support and local electeds kind of pushing this to the forefront, it still hasn't been really made a priority.
Thank you, Alderwoman Ingracia. And I want to also respond to Tiffany's question about enforcement strategies. So we will have Dr. Isom from Public Safety back next month to talk about an update on the enforcement strategies that we got some discussion on in the spring. So I hope that will be an opportunity for us to further this discussion. I'm also seeing in the chat some comments about Vision Zero policy approach. So as we are nearing the end of our public comment time, we're going to follow up on all the questions that have come up in this session. But I would also like to say that for the voting members who are here, I will follow up with you via email about how we might proceed as a group and what we might move forward from here. So are there any final public comments? And there's plenty in the chat, which we will capture. Okay. Thank
Liz,
you.
just one more quick thing again to possibly provide some glimmer of hope and just kind of some action items for this for the city and things like that. Obviously, Grand is getting repaved from end to end, and so again, along with the South Grand crash, there was the crash and the fatal crash on North Grand as well. And so we've been talking with the city through the traffic calming subcommittee a little bit about can that just be more than repaving and adding traffic calming elements along with that? And to the points about Vision Zero and stuff like that, I think we might have talked about that. I'm not sure the name of the federal grant, but there is a Safe Streets. I can't remember the exact name, but a Safe Streets for All type grant out from the federal government that I believe last time we talked about it, Scott, I believe you and John are in the process of getting that application built. So there is some funding coming, hopefully potential funding for high crash corridors and things like that from the federal government, and obviously from the repaving.
Yeah,
Thank
can I
you,
respond
Sam.
to that one briefly, Liz?
Yes, Scott, you can have 1 minute.
Thanks. Yeah, I think what Sam is mentioning is the Safe Streets for All program, which is a new federal program. It's both a planning and implementation program. And the goal of the program is definitely to get communities around the United States to adopt transportation plans that focus on safety. which will sometimes be called Vision Zero plans, but I think not always. So within the St. Louis region, East West Gateway has decided to submit an application for the entire region, which would enable the whole region, after the planning process is done, to be eligible for implementation grants in the future. So we'll be kind of under that umbrella. The guidance was that Department of Transportation did not want to see multiple applications from the same jurisdictions. So they didn't want an MPO to do an application and a city within that MPO to do a separate application. So East West Gateway is gonna lead that up. And that'll be an opportunity for us to participate. And I think because, there's a keener focus on this topic within the city compared to some parts of the region. I think it's, an opportunity to get a lot more detailed than we've been able to do in the past on identifying high crash and injury corridors.
Hey, Liz, if you have 30 seconds for me, I can give you a quick update on Board of Public Service action on the arterials and traffic calming.
Can you do it in 30 seconds, John?
Yes, I can.
All right.
So BPS within the coming weeks plans to issue a request for qualifications so that we have the ability to hire a traffic consultant to develop striping plans and potential traffic calming plans on Union, Grand, Kings Highway, Jefferson, and Goodfellow. That's it.
Great. Thanks, John. All right. Thank you, John and Scott, for those updates. I want to transition us. I know this is an incredibly important topic, but I want to transition us to ask Grace Kyung from the mayor's office to give a very brief update on scooters, which was part of our discussion topic in the last couple of months. As a note on scooters, Grace is not going to answer any questions on this. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to arrange a time for our new micromobility committee to meet with Grace and other members of the city's team in order to address questions and talk about next steps on micromobility. So more on that a little bit later in the meeting. Grace.
Thanks, Liz. As many of you are probably aware, if you've seen the news, that the city announced yesterday through Dr. Isom from the Department of Public Safety that we are going to continue halting scooter operations in downtown and downtown west for the rest of this year. Part of that decision-making process was thinking more holistically about a comprehensive approach to how scooters have been operating in the city instead of doing piecemeal solutions. And so for us to do this well, where we're not rushing the process, that was ultimately one of the reasons why. And also, this, as you all may have seen as well, it's been a fairly more quiet in downtown, and we've seen increased respondents from residents and businesses in downtown who have supported stopping the scooter sharing operations has helped them respectively as well. And so happy to continue these conversations with the subcommittee and future meetings as well.
Thank you so much, Grace. So we'll have a little bit more of an update on that subcommittee at the end of our meeting when we do our subcommittee updates. But Jackie, if you can put your email in the chat now, so if people are thinking about it and they want to participate in that conversation, shoot Jackie a note as the next contact. Okay, thank you very much, Grace. So I want to transition to our main agenda item for today. We are really lucky to have David Newberger and Andrew Lakey here to talk about the ADA transition plan. You all may remember that we heard an update on this last year, and so this is an opportunity to hear where things are and where they're going in the future. And of course, how this connects to mobility in our region, and especially inclusive mobility that is accessible to a wide range of different people. So I'm going to hand it over to David, and we will do some questions after they've given us an update.
Very good. Thank you for having us. Sometimes I have a frog in my throat these days. I hope it doesn't be a problem. Maybe it would be smart for me to just go to the beginning of where we are, so that everything is in context. 3 years ago, I think now we were allocated $1.5 million to work on the transition plan, and largely what that process is doing an assessment of features and also creating a structure for making decisions about how we eliminate barriers to access in many places. One of the most important aspects of a city's position is that it is very different from a retail position. Retail stores are required to build fully accessible facilities, and when they do alterations and other things, to make sure that they're fully accessible, and in addition to do everything that's readily achievable, even if that's not part of a planned construction. So a restaurant is not completely in compliance unless the tables, the menus, the restrooms, the coat racks, everything is taken care of. Some of that obviously is programmatic, and some of it is physical. Our job is to make sure that our programs are accessible, and our programs are defined in a very broad sense. So that, for example, if we have a public building that has restrooms in it, then our program is providing restrooms to the public. And as such, those have to be accessible for people to the public. But if we have a building that does not have fully accessible restrooms in it, a judgment needs to be made how many of these restaurants need to be fixed in order to come into compliance with program accessibility. And one would look at questions like the frequency of use in the restrooms, the location of the restrooms, their dispersion throughout the building, and a number of other subjects. And so not all the programs have to be accessible, but you have to have it possible for a person who's using a building, or perhaps a floor of a building, or perhaps a part of a floor of a building, to have an accessible restroom that they can use. So in the process that we've been going on in the work that has been done to date, and we have a contractor who I might say has done an excellent job, Oates Associates, I think, who have spearheaded the work with that first money that we have, and they have done a variety. They use the word assessments, I use the word maybe self-evaluations, but they've done a variety of studies. They have done many miles of streets and sidewalks, and they have reviewed many buildings in the city. The fact is that this process cannot cover everything. I like to explain that in terms of the fact that we have about 2,000 miles of sidewalks in the city, and we're in the low hundreds of what we can afford to do in this transition plan work. And then the question, which is very important, is how do we proceed from here? Because we need to fix all the sidewalks. Well, the answer is that it has to be an interactive process. We need to spend money in the future to know more about sidewalks, and we need to spend money now and in the future to eliminate barriers to access, so that someday we will have a fully accessible community. No city in the country is fully accessible. And when the ADA was passed, much as people hate the ADA, the capital money users, the fact is that it was designed to allow things to work over time. And the Justice Department, for example, doesn't think that we can solve all the sidewalks in a period of time. If we had a 15-year plan, which may be where we're going, I'm not sure all of the sidewalks would be included in that plan because it's such a big project. But we do what we best we can do. And I must say that there's a lot of attention to, are you spending significant money at all? And are you in good faith trying to cooperate? Those are the kinds of questions that the Justice Department looks at when it determines whether it's going to undertake some kind of an enforcement. And it's the exposure to that enforcement that it helps us know we better damn well get to work on it, which we are. So in the process that's gone on under our first contract, we have reviewed many miles of sidewalks and streets and many miles or many pieces of constructed property. And there's going to be more that we need to do after that. The question then becomes, when we have a system or a set of pieces of information about where the barriers are, how do we decide what we're going to do? And there are two levels to that analysis. When you look at a building, then our design engineers, BPS, are very skilled and develop a lot of information about a particular piece of property to consider what needs to be done. There's a question of what is on the public right of way and what is private. There's a question of what pools of money might be available for us to piggyback on to do a particular project. One of the things that the ADA definitely says is that we pay close attention to the express needs of citizens, and a project probably has to go up on the priorities if there is a clear need for it at this point, so that will guide some of our discussions. But in this process of our developing a solution to these things, I then want to bring back in this concept of program accessibility. If you look at City Hall, all of the offices, or not all of them, but there are dozens of offices that provide public services. And so we need each of those offices to be fully accessible. And the city lends or leases those offices to the county offices and so forth. So that is the city government's responsibility, along with the county office in their given stage. But in one sense, I look at the City Hall as largely a retail kind of place. It's not a program accessibility. You got to have your program be accessible in the collector's office, and the same in the assessor's office, and the same in the Board of Aldermen, and so forth. So a lot of that we don't have that program accessibility analysis. But in other circumstances, what we need to do is look at how buildings are used. And one of the areas that I think that's very important in, for example, is the rec centers, because the rec centers serve people of all ages, and they have programs that affect people that are different programs, conceivably programs that are in conflict, not in conflict, but have the same demand for two spaces. For example, actually one that I'm aware of is we have one of the rec centers has an adult program that's on an upper floor and a children's program that's on the first floor. And so one of the possible accommodations that we should do is simply reverse where those two programs are, so that our senior citizens don't have to climb a lot of steps, and the kids presumably can do okay. But then in the meantime, the restroom on the ground floor is somewhat troublesome, is not really accessible in some material ways. And so if we move the seniors to the first floor, then we better pay attention to what is going to happen to the restroom on that floor. So it becomes a kind of a puzzle that we have to work our way through when there are the same space serving the same city functions but serving it in different kinds of contexts. So working that out is a fundamental part of this problem. Once we decide that we want to do something, for example, suppose we identify a rec center that we're trying to make solutions on, then we look at the whole thing. For example, we might decide that we can do restrooms, but not change location of programs for some reason. And so then that's a BPS problem. It looks at budget, it looks at title, it looks at design, it looks at availability of other money. There's a big business decision that has to be made on what we do. But the transition plan then will, I hope, produce two things. One, look at the issue from the point of view of program accessibility, and then two, create a big prioritization program so that the decisions of what we do when we do it are done in a rational way, taking into account public comment. And as I say, especially when there are particular needs brought to us by the public, that goes up the list, and taking into account the actual programs or services we're providing. Last year, $2 million was set aside for elimination of barriers as part of the transition plan goals, and a series of projects were proposed in that process, and that $2 million is now being looked at by BPS, and there is an attempt to try to implement all the projects that were adopted when the Board of Aldermen looked at the issue. And that's in that numbers, available money, what can be done, and so forth kind of category. That list was constructed by the people who have been involved on the city side in working on things. And that's good. I have some confidence that we had some good suggestions. But now we have to move to a more public use for future years. I believe the city needs to understand that it needs to spend money every year for eliminating programs, and it probably needs to have some of that money spent on further assessments of what we have. So we had $1.5 million the first year. Happily, we have $2 million in the second year of what we're going, and at least my office will suggest that we need to find a place in the budget for that on a consistent basis, even in a time that we don't have a lot of the ARPA funding or other federal funding. But we need to go forward step by step. We want to wind up in a legal place, but more important, we want to wind up in a place that the city is as welcoming as possible, and certainly welcoming compared to every other city in the country. So if that's enough of a introduction, maybe too much, Liz, tell me how you would like me to proceed.
Well, I think we'd love to open up for questions. I think folks in this group are particularly interested in the mobility questions, and especially about sidewalks. We have one question in the chat right now, so maybe I'll start with that one, and then we'll see what other folks are sharing. Kia asks, has there been any discussion of exceeding the standards of the ADA by making the city compliant with PROAG, which is Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guideline Standards? And she shared a link with more info on that. So I think both the question here specifically about PROAG standards, and then also about the idea of exceeding the ADA and what the chances might be for that.
Well, the Board of Public Service and I take the view that we should comply with the PROAG standards. It's guidelines from the Access Board. It's not an established regulation right now, but it tells you best practices. So One of the things our office does is it looks at developers and city designs for streets and sidewalks, and we comment on compliance, and we rely on PROAG for our compliance. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. I also, but then in the broader context, do we go beyond what the ADA asks for? The whole question that is hard to get people to wrap their heads around is, why is it that such and such is a problem? And so what I'm always telling designers, you need to look at it through the eyes of the people with disabilities. One example that I would give you to that occurs from time to time is that designers often make curb ramps perpendicular to the sidewalk. But when you have an X kind of intersection, if you make the curb ramp perpendicular to one of the sidewalk, it aims away from the crosswalk because it doesn't pick up the angle of the crosswalk. And it would, if you rely on that curb ramp, you're going to go into a curb on the other side of the street if you're blind. And if you interpret, as people do, the run of the curb ramp as being aimed at the run of the crosswalk. So what we need, and certainly all citizens can help in this, and Andrea and I and the other members of the staff learn something every day. And we learn it largely from the needs of the public. What we're trying to do is to help the designers think about not just what is compliant, but why is this requirement there? How does it make life better for people with disabilities? And does the design then make life better for people with disabilities? Those are our fundamental goals within the Office on the Disabled.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I would like to open up the floor to see if there are other questions for David about what happens next with the plan, or what the expectations are. Sam?
Yeah, David, I had a question about timeline. I know sometimes with ADA transition plans and like sidewalk programs and things like that, it's good to have the plan for legal reasons and things like that. But sometimes I've seen this in a lot of other cities, the action in terms of making those sidewalks actually ADA accessible can be somewhere, in terms of like 50 to 100 years and things like that. So I have one question, then a follow-up question based off of your answer. What is the rough timeline for implementation? That's my first question, and then I have a quick follow-up question after your answer.
Okay. First of all, we're already, in a sense, implementing. And that's because we issue permits to people to engage in construction. And when it's streets and sidewalks, we're requiring people to build curb ramps, whether it's part of a plan or not. That's one of the ways we get ahead of the game, even though it isn't an organized kind of response. It at least is making sure what we put down with shovel and concrete is going to add to the overall elimination of barriers. Secondly, we're in the next quarter or so, we're going to be finished with that initial $1.5 million for the assessment. And we'll hopefully come to the point at which we will have what I like to refer to as a living transition plan. There will be a document. The document will have a lot of information about how priorities will be set. I mean, down to, for example, how do you decide what you do on a corner in its curb ramps? The highest priority is obviously a corner that does not have a curb ramp. But then if it does, if it's deteriorated, if it's passable but not compliant, we need to set priorities to try to unravel that, which we intend to do. Then you come to this question, everything is money. and everything is budgets. And so what we need to do is to make sure all of our other grant work, for example, the stuff that East-West Gateway funds through the highway laws, is done fully accessible. We may get that money for a whole different reason, but the execution needs to include full accessibility. And then I think that the city, and that's sort of what I was referring to earlier, we have $2 million in the budget now to address a number of immediate needs that is numbers that are not based upon projects that are going to happen anyway. It's looking at those things that we can find. I mean, one of the things that we allocated in that $2 million is to make sure that the pedestrian access to all of the senior centers in the city is accessible. You know, we pull that because we know that's a need. As we broaden the public comment, which we are looking for, many other people will be able to contribute to that as we make our judgments. But that $2 million is good news, and I hope you all lobby to make sure that the Capital Committee every year puts some amount of money into the capital budget for implementation of the transition plan. If that's not done, then new projects that developers and others bring to us will be done right. MoDOT will do them right. The city itself will do them right. But that's because they have other sources of money. And what we need to do is to make sure that there is money set aside for fixing those things that otherwise are not going to be paid for in the ordinary new project world. Follow up?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up funding and the $2 million there. I'm wondering if there's possibly any city interest. I'm not sure who can even bring these things up in terms of like propositions for bonds or tax. You know, I know a lot of cities have done things where they do a slight property increase tax, you know, something like $100 a year, you know, and that money goes directly into a sidewalk pool, something that the city can then access. So basically all sidewalks from across the city are accessible. Is that something that interests the city, or is that something that could be talked about to possibly put more funding into creating, you know, a complete ADA accessible sidewalks across the city?
There are several ways that the city gets money to do some of this work. And John Kohler is our star in that area. Of seeing projects that are being funded by the feds and putting in applications to get projects done. And those projects are going to be fully accessible, but they're also at some level are impacted what the members of Congress have decided and the federal government has decided is the hot thing at the moment. We're getting money for cycle tracks. So if we can get a grant for a cycle track, that grant will include money to do the improvements for accessibility that are necessary where that track is. That is a consistent pattern. The other place that the city gets money is through capital bond issues that it runs from year to year. And I think we have a new bond coming up right now in August, don't we? And those bonds are, the money for those bonds are sold for specific purposes. That's where fire trucks and police cars come from, and a variety of other things, and physical improvements. And some of the money is about mechanical in the sub basements of buildings. I mean, there a lot of things we have to spend capital on. And I keep hoping that we will have in the budget, that capital budget, every year, some money set aside for accomplishing goals on in the transition plan. It's a struggle because everybody needs the money that they're asking for. And it's a problem, but that's where I think more or less regular money can come from. That is to say, to have some portion of a bond be able to pay for the transition plan work. And those bonds, what happens is that you get a bond, the work that's going to be done on that bond is planned and is executed. The bond gets paid off in some period of time, and then the city can now go out and issue another set of bonds because it paid off its last set and basically replicate the process. One of the things, partially aside, but one of the things that I'm always thinking about this city is that the city was built for more than 1 million people. And we have probably fewer than 300,000 people in the city right now, which, and a city with more than 300 or more than 1 million people needed wider streets and bigger properties in all other kinds of cases. So now what was planned for 1 million people to support in our capital assets can only be supported locally from the from what those 300,000 or fewer citizens can pay in taxes. So we are always behind the 8 ball, the whole city, not just the transition plan. But what we're struggling to do is to do the best we can. And I have this big flag flying on the back of my wheelchair that says, "And don't forget the disabled." And we are happily integrating that thought into the broader thought about how we allocate capital needs.
Thanks, David. We're running right up on our time to transition to our next topic, but I heard what you were talking about, making sure that residents are advocating for funding, ensuring that there's funding in the capital budget going forward to fund those things that won't be covered in other sources. I'm curious if you have in a sort of 1-minute summary, other things that we as a committee or residents who are advocating for this kind of work can do. And then I want to also encourage, if there are other questions, Kaylina has just posted one, please put them in the chat. We'll follow up with David and Andrew afterwards and make sure we get answers to those. So David, any 1-minute summary on sort of next steps for residents?
Well, I mean, residents need to talk about these issues. One of the features of the get along, go along world in St. Louis is that many people with disabilities do not express their needs. They're frustrated and they just let things pass. And so the people who are interested in a good city government like this group need to join us and not forget that the accessibility issue is a very important issue, just as other kinds of diversity issues are very important, and many, many other health issues and so forth. The problem is that people with disabilities have lived generations of being put on one side and ignored. And it's important for the general population to join those of us with disabilities to build the new public policies.
Thank you. And thank you so much, David, and Andrew, as our regular consistent committee member, for all the work that you're doing on this. We'll follow up with some of these additional questions. So thank you, a round of applause. I want to transition us over to subcommittee updates. We are going to start with the engagement committee. Dawn, I believe you have a very short update.
Yes, so I believe it was Patrick that asked it earlier, if applications get followed up on. They do at every engagement subcommittee, which meets the 3rd Wednesday of every month. We go through any applications that we received, and the committee will put forth a recommendation either as this individual joining as a non-voting or voting member. No application that I have seen in my 6 months as co-chair have been declined. We definitely want more people to join and to be involved. This month we had 2 applications. One is being recommended as a non-voting member with a couple of subcommittees that they could join. And one is recommended as a voting member. Liz will follow up with the voting members to have them vote on that person if they want them to join. So anyone who's a voting member, please look out for an email from Liz. Besides that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the chat. But that is it from the engagement subcommittee.
Great, thanks, Dawn. And in the interest of time, I'm going to do a quick update on 2 of our other subcommittees. So thank you to those subcommittee chairs for letting me do this. So as Dawn mentioned, the engagement committee meets every 3rd Wednesday. Be in touch with Dawn or Charles to join that group and participate in their work with membership and inclusion. The traffic calming committee is getting really close, thanks to the hard work of Bryce and Amy from TrailNet, to completing a traffic calming guide that can be a resource for resident stakeholders and decision makers. They still need some help with that. So be in touch with Bryce, and Bryce's email is on here about traffic calming. I'm going to skip open streets and parklets because we're going to give Sam the rest of the time. And then, as previously mentioned, the new micromobility subcommittee is meeting to review best practices and answer questions about micromobility, especially some of the things we've discussed in our previous meetings around what the CMC position is. The next meeting for that group is on the 4th at 2 p.m. They'll meet every other week. And Jackie, again, is the contact for that. So I'm going to now hand over the rest of our time to Sam, who's going to talk about Parking Day and some exciting upcoming programs.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I can get this done in 5 minutes. But for those who don't know what Parking Day is, that is basically a national urbanist holiday where people will basically take parking spots away from metered parking and cars and give them back to people, which is a lot what this committee is about in terms of the open space subcommittee. So in the subcommittee, we have built a Parking Day website for basically, and we've been in partnership with the treasurer's office and other partners to build this resource where there's an application that we make it pretty quick. And so basically all the information that we need to know, that possible applicants need to know for Parking Day is on this website. I'll share it in the chat. If you click on numerous of these things, there's a guide that basically goes through a lot of the things. Hopefully you can see this. I can't see if I'm sharing, but this is the guide that goes through determining locations, developing a site plan, the things you should include on your site plan, filling out the application, and some other materials and stuff that are good. I'll be the main contact for Parking Day. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is pasted all over the website and over this application as well. We also have a flyer right here, which I'll get into a little bit later. And then the application is pretty simple. Basically, all you need to do if you want to get a Parking Day application is just fill this out. You will need to get the meter number. So you'll need to go to your potential location, and there should be a number right on the meter, and you'll need to put that in there as well. So I'll put that website, the CMC website, in the chat. The last thing I wanted to mention is obviously we want the subcommittee had this internal goal of having 10 Parking Day parklets across the city. And so this is a very flexible list that I will put in the chat as well about potential areas, potential businesses. Feel free to add on to these. These are just things that I came up with off the top of my head. Mainly they're just connections that I have within TrailNet sort of. But we're looking for people to, I'm only one person and I don't live in St. Louis, so I can't go door to door and do these things. So we are looking for people, if you have good relationships, like for example, Don put me in contact with the owners of Have a Cow on Lafayette. In the subcommittee meeting, Cheryl, who goes to Running Wild quite often, she offered to go talk to them on the Tower Grove McCree intersection. So I'm going to put this in the chat as well. Basically, if you sign up for a business or put a business in there, we are putting the faith in you to go reach out to that business, talk to them. Again, if you want to include me on an email, if any of those people have any questions about the application or site plan or anything, feel free to CC me on any emails. I'll be that contact person there. So that's really all I have. There's a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has anything, I will yield the rest of my time to put the links in the chat and to take questions on Parking Day. And also, if you didn't see it, Parking Day is September 16th. That is a Friday. We're trying to, I believe in the time slot, I think we're trying to keep times to preferably within the hours the sun is up. Obviously, we want to make it sure everyone's safe when they do these parklets and these demonstrations. So within that kind of, like 10 o'clock to, 5 p.m., have those work hours, those kinds of times. So again, feel free, any questions, please direct them to me. And we do have, on that doc, I did mention there are flyers. If you need to have flyers printed out, Liz will be your contact person for that. So feel free to reach out to Liz for printing needs. If you don't have access to a printer, all other questions come to me.
Thanks, Sam. Any questions about parking day? I want to say that I've contacted a couple people already, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. People are excited about parking day. Okay, we have Sam.
Quickly, yeah, Matt actually sent me a message. Matt, I'm not sure if this is something I can share publicly, but the ASLA, the American Society of Landscape Architects, is that what that stands for? Okay. They actually, they have a website, then they might be, is that the St. Louis chapter or is that the full chapter, Matt?
It's a full chapter.
Okay, so it looks like they're doing some possible parking day stuff into the weekend. I think per our conversations for the treasurer's office, we're just going to keep ours to Friday in terms of just like just capacity and things like that. So thanks for that. That's actually good. That's good information. But whatever we can do to spread the word out to get other cities and other people excited about it as well. That's good info. So.
Sam, I think one thing you didn't mention, but is in the guide, is that the process that is with the treasurer's office is for metered parking spots, but it is possible to reserve non-metered parking spots. And also, if people have control over other parking spaces that they desire to not have be parking spaces for this day, there's flexibility within that. So get in touch with Sam about those details.
Yeah, correct. So if you're not in a metered parking space, I believe the name has changed for the Board of Public Service, but I believe it's like a public encroachment permit. The link for that permit is in the guide. So yeah, metered parking space goes to the treasurer's office since they control those meters. Everything else goes through BPS.
Great, thank you. Okay, so seeing that we have given a big update, thanks to everyone for joining us today in this difficult time in our region. We will be following up with folks on a wide variety of topics. Look forward to seeing you next month, and we'll have Dr. Isom come and join us. Okay, thank you and have a great afternoon.